Have another conversational sermon. We've done a couple of these. Everyone loves them. I love them. We want to do more of them. And this morning, we have a newer member with us, Tamira Burns.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd love to start by just hearing a little bit from you about what the work you're doing in the community is now, and what has brought you to the place that now you're sitting in this fellowship having a conversation about gender beyond the binary? Just a little question to start us off.
Let me start with the basics. I'm the Administrative Director for Peacework Medical. We provide transgender support groups here in Winston-Salem. We also do a tremendous amount of transgender healthcare and diversity training to colleges, universities, fellowships, retirement homes, all over the United States, actually. We just did a 3-hour in-service with Cone Health that was required training from the front office to the back. And what brought me to this place, as I was called to do justice early in life, is I was a member of the LGBTQIA+ community, but for me and a lot of us, the T was silent. Yeah. The child that I was told was a girl, congratulations, you have a girl, became my son at age 14. And I had to navigate what that meant. I had to navigate my attachments about binary. I had to navigate my attachments about what it meant to have a daughter or a son. And I found myself deeply enmeshed in learning more. My son is pushing 30. I told him that when he turned 30, I would simply go poop and disappear. Because I don't even know how that's possible. Just saying. But my love for this community is so deep. For any marginalized community needs people with big hearts and willing hands and frequently a loud voice to stand up for them. And this is the community that I was called to.
Yeah. And I guess I'll share a little bit about why this is an important conversation to me to be involved in too, not just your minister, but as a person. A lot of you know that I identify as queer and dated women a lot of my life, and one of those women wound up not being a woman at all, but a man, and I, when met with that news, did not respond well. It was not the relationship that I thought I was in, and I wish I had responded better. And in that reflection, I had to do my own learning about why this was so jarring for me, right? And the work that I had to do. That relationship ended for other, but not wholly other reasons. And it just left me with a lot of my own sort of reflection on within that LGBT community that I was a part of, the T was very silent and sometimes shunned and separated, and I realized that that was true more for me than I wanted it to be. So that was over a decade ago, and I've done a lot of my own work in that, and just from being involved and really from having relationships and working with younger folks, with our youth and doing some youth ministry, I was like, wow, these kids have just blown off any conception of what a gender binary is. Yeah. But that was not my reaction to it at first, right? I was like, that feels a little entitled. And I have worked really hard to fit into this woman box. And I worked really hard at it, and I made it my own in a way that felt right to me. And so I almost felt a little challenged when younger people were just we don't need that anymore. I was no, I've worked really hard to you know, like to claim being a woman. And for a couple of years, I was like, you know, these kids doing this like she-they thing. Like, I was like, that's actually probably more true to me and true for me, just in how I experience my own like gender on a spectrum. But like, I don't need to do that, right? Because like, I've worked hard to make women work for me. So like, I don't need to do that whole thing, right? So that's where I was for a while. And then some of you who've been to General Assembly might know Jessica York. She's an elder in our association. And I was emailing with Jessica York, such a wise person, was someone who kind of like brought me into Unitarian Universalist leadership. And Jessica York, in her like 60s, has changed her pronouns to she, they. And I was like, gosh darn it. If Jessica York can be learning from younger generations and integrating that into her own self-conception, like, why am I feeling held back? And like, I realized it was because I had worked hard to make that box work for me when really it didn't. And then I let go of it. And I was like, no, I exist somewhere in this messy middle, and I feel great about it. Yeah, but that was, yeah, it's hard. And like, thank goodness for our youth who are just, goodness, teaching us so much.
My honest belief about so much of the youth, and really we're seeing a huge piece of the 18 to 25 coming in who do not accept our gender boxes, thank you, and why should they? It was a social construct to begin with. There isn't just XX and XY, and that's important to know. And so when we talk about sex, what really is sex? Do you think it's in your pants? It's not. And it is a little bit complex, but I'm going to reduce it down to chromosomes, okay? Because that's what you learned in eighth grade biology. There was XX and XY, right? Do you know that there's also XXY, XXX, XYY? By the way, my son is XXY. And do you know that these common differences in chromosomes that generally define your sex happens in 1 in every 400 births? Do you know how common that is? And so what I ask you is, how the heck do you even know what your sex is? Really? And that's important. And so these youngsters, they're breaking out of the binary boxes that have hurt us all, right? A binary box that said that only XX and XY were valid. And based on whether you were a man or a woman, you had separate gender roles. Yeah. You were held up or held down. Or you were oppressed. And oppression happens on all areas, right? It's not just women who were oppressed. Yeah. And so why do we hold on to those boxes? I mean, really? When those boxes have only served to further oppress everybody, these youngsters are throwing them away and saying, really now? Do we need this anymore? And I think it is an evolution, not just of thought, but of body.
Yeah. And I want to circle back to something that you said, because for some of us, it's maybe the first time we've heard some kind of like new scientific information that supports the fact that even sex, like female and male, is actually not as like one and the other and just two as we have been thought to believe, right? Mm-hmm. There's like DNA realities that say, no, it's not just 2 chromosomes, it's not just XY, and I think for some of us, like this is maybe new information. Am I right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is actually, I think, one of the ways in which like Unitarian Universalism and how much we care about like learning new things and like evolving with science, like really actually enables us to shift in ways that is probably harder for other folks. So I think that's a real strength we have.
I think it is one of the most beautiful strengths
Yeah.
of this community, who is working so hard to get out of the levels of comfort, right? To sit in your discomfort and learn new things. That takes so much love and courage. That's what I love about this group.
Are there like other pieces of information from your professional work that you want folks to know? So either like information for folks who are cisgender, or like support information for folks who are transgender. And maybe we should define cisgender and transgender, I'm realizing as I say that.
Well, and even the word transgender can be on a binary, so we're going to break this out a little bit. Cisgender means same. Cis is same. So I am a cisgender woman. My body and how I perceive myself in the world matches.
Sex and gender.
Sex and gender, right.
Yep.
So my sex matches my gender and my gender expression. That is the same. I am a queer woman. That's sexuality. That actually has nothing to do with either my sex or my gender. 3 different things.
And the confusing thing is that, especially in younger but not youth generations like myself, queer can be used to talk about both sexual orientation and gender identity.
Right. It's a reclaimed slur word for the entire community.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about transgender when we're talking about binary, because there are, like my son, although he is technically intersex based on his chromosome. Right. We didn't know that when he first came out as my son. So a person who is assumed to be female when they are born, but intrinsically with their entire soul believes and knows that they are male. It's not a choice. Their brain tells them this, their heart, their soul tells them this, and they don't match. And that causes dysphoria. And it's horrifyingly hard for some, and not so hard for others. It's not the same for everybody. My husband, who is a trans man, described his dysphoria as a pebble in his shoe. He went through his entire life with this uncomfortable pebble and couldn't figure out what it was until he, as a medical professional, diagnosed himself at age 55 and became Joseph. My son, on the other hand, had dysphoria so bad that at age 8, he was laying in his bed crying to me that he wanted to die because he didn't feel like he belonged in this world and he couldn't put words to it. A person who is assigned male at birth, who intrinsically with their entire body, mind, and soul knows that they are a woman, is a transgender woman. Those things are on the binary. But there's a whole range of gender expression in the middle that may be a little more masculine, a little more feminine, somewhere in the middle, or none of that. How people identify in their soul is as varied as the number of people in here. And that's one of the things we're trying to get out into the world, is that gender is a spectrum, just like sexuality is a spectrum.
Yep.
And each one of us in this room is on a spectrum when you think about it. And really ask people, what kind of spectrum are they on? And they'll tell you.
Yeah. And I love that you really pointed out that gender identity and sexual orientation are different things, and they both happen on a spectrum. And I think often we've conflated those things just because people who were lesbian or gay or bisexual who were already involved in like same gender relationships were not as confined by gender roles, right? So like had a little more flexibility to like play around with what it is to be a woman or what it is to be a man. But that does not mean that there were like gender identity, that like people had different gender identities, sure. Right? And I think it's easy for us to kind of like conflate or confine them, but they are in fact very different things operating on different information. And I also want to put a plug in for the fact that Tamira will be doing a Gender 101 session on July 21st after the service. So if you want to like come and get some more info, that will be another opportunity. And there will be more, and we'll talk about them more a bit later. But is there what? Is there food?
I think it is a lunch and learn, actually. So yes, come for food and, you know, blow your mind.
Amazing. You were going to say something else, though, and then I maybe...
The funny thing is that as I've done a tremendous amount of education about the trans and non-binary community to both cisgender people and people who are gay and lesbian, and the hardest pushback I frequently get is from the gay and lesbian community. And I think part of that is because part of it is the hard binary boxes that the gay and lesbian communities are in. And for years, those of us that are LGB discriminated against the B, right?
Yep.
How dare you're bisexual? Choose, darn it. And so it's actually been harder to get the gay and lesbian community on board with these definitions than people who are not gay and lesbian. And truly, when we're working for justice, one of the reasons the trans community is getting hammered politically right now is they don't believe we're a big enough voting bloc to matter. Right? So what happened when gay marriage was legalized is that our straight allies formed voting blocs with us.
Yep.
What the trans community needs now is not just the cisgender allies, but our LGB community to stand up for us too.
Yeah. And to that, just a piece of information, we'll be talking more about General Assembly and service next Sunday, but a pretty awesome thing, I did have to write this down so I use the right words, is that at General Assembly, we actually passed a business resolution that's for embracing transgender, non-binary, and intersex people is a fundamental expression of UU religious values, it states. Now, I'll name there was some difficult and harmful things said in the conversation that led up to this decision, and it still passed with, I want to say, like 90, 80, something like that %. And what was fascinating is that we intentionally had this as a business resolution as opposed to like our witness. We also have this article where we kind of like vote on actions of immediate witness. But this was a business resolution, and the reason our Unitarian Universalist Association leadership said that it was a business resolution is, one, because it makes it so that the association is bound and accountable to working on this, like within the association and in their supportive congregations, but also because it gives us leverage in courts. When folks who are transgender are facing issues in court, and there are folks from the religious right who are trying to say that these people are violating their own freedom of religion, we actually now have the grounds to say that actually, like, our religion says that, like, all trans and non-binary and intersex people are people, and, like, you're actually violating our religion if you're saying that they're not. Yeah. So that's really exciting. Oh, and I had another thing that I wanted us to talk about, and now it's gone from my head. But
find it in your heart.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about what your organization is doing and what folks might benefit from or want to be involved with. And if there's support groups too for folks, oh, I remember what I was going to say now. Let's do that first. Which is why is it that the two of us, you who identify as cisgender, I'm who am like basically cisgender, so why not, right? Are the people who are talking about this, because we do have folks in our community who are trans and non-binary. And also, actually, yeah, go for it.
Because for me, in this conversation, I understand how hard it was. Let me tell you that when Ryan came out to me as Ryan, it was in a Chili's restaurant.
Blessed be, Chili.
After a queer camp out up in the mountains of Payson, Arizona. And I literally went into the bathroom, the ladies' bathroom, and cried. I was inconsolable. I had no idea how to parse this. All of my attachments to raising this fabulous, wise woman, also a hair's breadth from being a village idiot, never forget that. And you know, that sacred bond that we think we hold with our daughters, I didn't even know how to parse this. And I was raising other boys, right? And my son thought that I was abandoning him. And so it took a while for me to come around and really, really look at what this meant. And that meant diving in, really diving in to what this is and what science says. And how many more people are there like this? What does this mean? And then I had to unravel my attachment to the binary, my attachment to a daughter, my attachment to all of the things. And there were a lot of things I had to give up, including the sacredness of the name.
Yeah.
Right? So that was the thing. My son, once we got through all of that and he realized I was becoming his greatest ally, when he went to change his name, he asked me what I would have named him if he had been born a boy. And I said Michael. And my son's name is Ryan Michael Alexander.
Yeah, and one more comment and then we'll start to wrap up a little bit. I felt that it was important for us to start this conversation and not folks in our community who are trans or non-binary themselves, partially because like there are going to be some questions, you know, and maybe some confusion. And maybe some of you all, like me, are like, no, but I've worked really hard to make the gender binary work for me. And like, there's like some hurt in people not wanting to keep that going. And I think it's actually important that like, we are the first ones who hold that and accompany people through that. And like, that's part of what trying to be an active ally is. And that also, you know, we have folks who are newer to our fellowship, and I feel like it's my job to be like, you're welcome here, and I'm going to do the work to make sure that other people get you enough so that you can be truly welcomed and celebrated here, you know? Like, that's what we're about. Thanks. So, in moving out, anything else that people should know about what's coming up for both for like the work that your organization is doing, support groups that maybe some folks in here might want to know about, and then we already talked about July 21st, more time for conversation. I saw some hands, definitely more time for questions there too.
Yeah. So in July 1st, it's Sex, Gender, and Sexuality 101, basically. It's where we start from. As far as Peacework Medical, and this is all part of Peacework Medical, we've been a nonprofit for 24 years. We started our work here in Winston-Salem in September of 22 and have exploded, which is wonderful. What a terrible problem to have. We do hold transgender support groups on the first Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of the month. Trans-feminine support groups are on the first Tuesday. The gender expansive, non-binary, two-spirit, third gender folks are on the first Wednesday. Trans-masculine people are on the first Thursday. Currently, we're meeting at the North Star LGBTQ Center, but we have outgrown it. We are literally so big, we are against fire code. What a terrible problem to have.
What a great problem to have.
Yeah, that's facetious.
I figured, but
Yeah.
we've used that
Right.
refrain here in the fellowship. Okay.
But also on the first Thursday, we do have an allies meeting. And you can come to this meeting no matter where you are. If you are at the very beginning of this going, I just don't get it, help, that's cool. Or if you want to come and support the people who are who are saying, I don't get it, help, it's for everybody, anybody. You can find all of our support group information on peaceworkmedical.com. Peaceworkmedical, all one word, .com. Our history is there, everything you need to know. Every April, on April 25th next year, so mark your calendars, we're having our third annual Transgender Community Cookout. We had 86 people this year. I smoked 70 pounds of chicken.
And the link to this organization is in the worship description that went out probably this morning and Friday and other times, and we'll be in there again next Friday. So plenty of places to look if you want to be able to connect to North Star Medical.
Peacework Medical.
Peacework Medical. I'm sorry.
In
Mixing my names.
In August, we're moving to the community room at Oak Street Health in Winston-Salem because it's 5 times the size as North Star, and we don't have to pay rent. And since we run on a shoestring budget, that's important.
Well, thank you so much
Thank
for being
you.
with us and for sharing some of your story and your beautiful spirit. And just, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.